So as a child, the last thing I wanted to become was a teacher. And that's because my father's a teacher, and so was my grandfather. But by the time I was finishing college, I decided that I wanted to teach because as I looked back on my life, the people that I most admired were teachers, and I felt like I really wanted to give back to a profession that had given so much to me. But I always thought like it was only going to be just for a short while until I figured out what I was going to become as an adult, or heard some voice from God to go do something. And so as I was thinking about those things, I just asked my old high school principal for a job, and he gave it to me like basically on the spot, which was really weird. But anyway, 5 years after that, I'm still teaching. And a year ago, I decided that I wanted to commit to this job, to this profession. I never really heard the voice of God telling me to do that. It just made a lot of sense to do it. And rather than waiting around for a feeling or, trying to listen for an audible voice, I've just thanked God that there's this open door, and now I'm walking through it by getting my credential. So the credential program is something that really requires a lot of resilience because it means it's a lot less time that I get to spend with my wife, as well as with my friends and doing other really life-giving activities. But because of my wife's support, lots of prayer, and just such undeniable favor from God, I really think that gives me resilience to push through. I really don't deserve any of this. Like, I don't deserve to live in Southern California and to have a job that's really meaningful, to get to pour into people's lives and make a positive impact. All of those are just really amazing things to get to do. And I just remember, like, that's none of it. I deserve that. If I were to get what I deserved, things would look really different for me, a lot uglier and scarier. That kind of resilience, I think, is really important for dealing with classroom management. That's been a challenge for me in this 5th year of teaching. This has been the first time I've been teaching middle school, because until then I was teaching high school seniors. But classroom management is really challenging, and I just have to remind myself I'm not entitled to my job. I'm not entitled to my job being easy. In fact, any amount of enjoyment that I get from my job is pure grace. Toil is a part of God's curse on mankind, so I really am not entitled to any enjoyment in my job whatsoever. And if that means, my students' good behavior, even though they really ought to respect me as the person set in authority over them, insofar as it pleases me, it's not something that I'm entitled to. So anyhow, cultural beliefs that influence my desire to become a teacher. I think one big one is being Presbyterian, since we believe that children of believers are part of the church. Educating them with proper doctrine in an accessible and compelling way is a really huge priority. So things like Sunday school and youth group aren't just entertainment or babysitting until they're old enough to go to like real church, but it really is an important part of supporting their presence in the real church, because they're little kids are expected to be a part of or not expected, but really encouraged strongly to be a part of the church service. I think one aspect of social injustice that has influenced my perspective on education is the privilege I've often had as an Asian student. I've rarely ever had anyone doubt that I could do it. Everyone kind of assumed like, oh, he's an Asian student, he should be able to get his stuff together and he knows what he's doing, and so on and so forth. And I don't know how I would have turned out if it weren't for that. I think God did give me a good mind and a lot of passion in things um, that have to do with intellect and education, but all along I've always had people really believing that I could do it. Um, and so as a teacher, I think I want to reverse that in a small way by giving every student the same benefit of the doubt that was given to me. Um, as far as how the K through 12 setting that I was raised in has influenced my educational philosophy, I would say that it's been immense. So I'm currently teaching at the same school that I graduated high school from, and it's a K through 12 school. And I started going to the school when it first opened in the year 2000. I was in the fourth grade, and I stayed all the way through high school, graduating from there in 2009. So a really important aspect of that school is classical education. A lot of that's based on, to summarize it, there's this idea called the trivium. You got to start with developmentally appropriate things for small children, move on to more complex things that eventually lead to even more complex tasks. It really intersects a lot with Piaget's developmental theory. And in addition to the trivium, we also teach virtue education. So that's a particular philosophy about morality. And mentorship is a really huge part of that, because rather than just telling people like that's, students, that behavior was bad, it's against the rules, it's actually something that engages the students with an understanding of their humanity and what it means to live well as a human being. And that really engages the students and teachers soul to soul. A lot of this was codified by a scholar named Martianus Capella in the 5th century. He was Roman, but a lot of this is actually really rooted in ancient Greek ideas about education that go even further back than Capella. So obviously historical literacy is a really important part of classical education as well, being able to understand what the roots are, why current culture is the way it is, and where all these ideas and practices come from in the backdrop of 3,000 years of Western history and civilization. And I'd say that as far as my credentialing currently is concerned, I would say that much of what I'm learning through it about educational psychology and pedagogical theory really comes back to classical education, because that's where it all comes from, and it certainly confirms my commitment to it. So that's about it.